Hello and welcome to the Vault of Truth YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to examine 9 common but incorrect flat earth proofs. I've seen these proofs used on far too many flat earth channels and websites. And the flat earth community needs to realize, if we don't start really stepping our game up in terms of the argument that we are presenting to the world, then no one, including scientists and PhDs in various professions, is going to take us seriously. So let's jump in and examine these arguments. Number 1, water always finds its own level. So I'm sure many of you have come across memes like this, where they say, we see water behaving like this, but we never see water behave like this and never like this. Basically trying to say that water is not going to conform to the shape of the terrain that is underneath it. And then we see memes like this that double down on this concept, even claiming that if the earth were a globe, and the oceans were forced to stick to the earth because of gravity, the water would still remain level, not curved. And then we see memes like this that add yet another incorrect element to this by saying that even if you had curved oceans on the ball earth, being held to the earth by gravity, rivers would be flowing uphill to get to the curved oceans, because for some reason they think that sea level there would be the tangent line at the top of that arc, and that all of the gravity vectors would be pointing straight down, perpendicular to that tangent line, as shown there. I think it's obvious why this is wrong, but I'll explain it quickly anyways. These lines are showing the correct direction of the gravity vectors, and their associated tangent lines, making it easy to see that even on the globe diagram there, the rivers are still going downhill. Now, how about in this example? I thought water always found its level and remained flat. But instead, we see this forming a domed surface. And this happens due to hydrogen bonds between the water molecules that pull each other together, allowing the water to be filled just slightly higher than the rim of the cup, forming a curved surface. How about in this example? I thought water always found its level. Yet when we spin the bucket, centrifugal forces pull water molecules to the outside wall of the bucket, creating a parabolic surface. How about these bodies of water? I thought that bodies of water always laid flat. Yet we can see that again. They are forming oblate spheroids due to the hydrogen bonds that exist between the water molecules. So hopefully you get the point now. Instead of saying that water always finds its level, or that bodies of water will always lay flat, the correct thing to say is that bodies of water will always seek equilibrium in regards to the forces that are exerted upon that body of water. So therefore, in the globe model, with gravity vectors all pointing to the center of the sphere, there is no issue with there being curved bodies of water upon the surface of the globe. And sea level at any point around that globe will just be the tangent line at any point upon that surface, 90 degrees perpendicular to the gravity vector. Number 2, water cannot stick to a spinning ball. Now, at this point, I'm sure some of you are probably saying, this is a silly one. Why are you addressing this? Well, you will be surprised at how many flat earth channels and sites that I have seen where they make the statement that water does not stick to a spinning ball, and then they proceed to take a wet tennis ball or basketball and throw it into the air, giving it a spin, so that they can show water being slung off in a slow motion recording. This misunderstanding arises from people's lack of knowledge of the magnitude of the forces involved. So you can see here, if you spin a wet tennis ball, the gravitational acceleration, and yes, I realize there is no gravity and there is no such thing as mass attracting mass. However, we have to analyze this through the lens of their model because people are trying to debunk them on their own model. So we can see that the gravitational pull of that tennis ball will be microscopic at 0.0000000332 meters per second squared. In contrast, the centrifugal acceleration, the force pulling away from the tennis ball, is immensely way more powerful at 376 meters per second squared. So which force do you think wins that battle? However, on the globe, the gravitational acceleration is 9.8 meters per second squared pulling towards the globe, while the centrifugal acceleration, the force pulling away from the globe, due to its spin, is microscopic in comparison at 0.03 meters per second squared. So you can see the dominant force there. So flat earthers need to drop this one as a globe debunk. Number 3, an atmosphere needs a container. So I'm sure everyone has seen this meme that shows the atmosphere next to the vacuum of space, and it basically says no one knows how this works. Almost all flat earth channels that I visit, or websites, use this as a proof, and it's incorrect. An atmosphere contained within a gravitational field around a planet in the vacuum of space would work perfectly fine. So let's look at how a pressurized atmosphere can exist next to a vacuum. The first issue a lot of people have when they think of a vacuum is they think of a vacuum cleaner or any other kind of vacuum chamber on the Earth, such as ones you might see in a laboratory. Obviously, if you create an opening on any part of those vacuum chambers, the air immediately rushes in. And then people make the incorrect analogy of the vacuum chamber being space and the surrounding air being the atmosphere of the Earth. Another incorrect example that people create is filling a balloon with a gas, for example, or filling a tire with air and saying that all of that gas needs a container to maintain the gas pressure. And that if you open any part of the container, then the gas pressure will immediately diffuse out into the surrounding air until the inside of the container matches the pressure of the outside air. And these examples are not wrong, it's just the fact that they are not a correct analogy for the atmosphere next to the vacuum of space. Number 1, the magnitude and direction of the forces matter. And number 2, scale matters. Not everything in physics can be scaled up or down indefinitely, with everything continuing to work the exact same way. And I think that's the biggest part of the misunderstanding here. As you see here in this diagram, the air density decreases as you increase altitude. I think everyone knows that. So obviously this means there are far more air molecules near the ground than there are at higher elevations. Now, people also need to understand why a pressurized gas expands in the first place and what forces are involved. When a gas is pressurized, gas molecules are close enough together that their electron clouds overlap and you get electrostatic repulsion. Then, once the gas molecules push each other apart to where they are out of range for electrostatic repulsion, you can think of all the molecules as repulsing magnets that are pushing each other apart. And just like two repulsing magnets, as soon as you move them far enough apart, you no longer feel the repulsive force. After these gas molecules reach that distance, the thermal kinetic force takes over due to temperature of the gas, and the gas particles or molecules then move about and ricochet off of each other. And so these are the two forces at work here. So at ground level and very low elevations, it's the electrostatic repulsion that is the dominant force that's pushing the molecules upward. And then once you go a little higher in elevation, the air molecules are no longer pushing each other away due to electrostatic repulsion, but they are bouncing off of each other, with some of them ricocheting in the upward direction. At the very top of the atmosphere, you have the last layer of gas molecules that have ricocheted off of the molecules below them. And for a moment, they began to move even higher in elevation towards space until the force of Earth's gravity pulled them back down again, only to ricochet off the molecules below them once again, bouncing in all kinds of directions, some upward again. And then the process repeats. Earth's gravity pulls them back down, and so on, ensuring that these sparsely spread molecules at the very top layer never continue to move indefinitely towards space. So this is what keeps the atmosphere contained. It is gravity in their model. And the same will be true on a flat Earth as well. A flat Earth does not need a container to maintain a blanket of atmos layer over the Earth. Because again, the downward pulling force that is present on the flat Earth becomes that container. Let me explain it a different way just to make sure it's clear for everyone. Let's say you start with the globe Earth and you start with one molecule of air. What will happen to that one molecule? Gravity will pull it to the ground. Now what happens if you put a blanket of air around the Earth, one molecule thick? They will repulse and bounce off of each other in a sideways direction, and gravity will still pull all of them to the ground. Then what happens if you start adding air molecules on top of the existing blanket of molecules? As gravity pulls these new molecules downward towards the existing molecules, they will bounce back upward or in sideways or diagonal directions due to electrostatic repulsion and their kinetic energy. Even if any of these molecules ricochet in a perfectly upward direction relative to the surface of the Earth, they will not get very far at all before gravity pulls them back down again. And so you could continue on like this, adding layer after layer or blanket after blanket of molecules around the Earth, and the result will be the same. None of the molecules would keep moving into space. That would only happen if you turn the force of gravity off, and in that case, the gas would forever expand into the vacuum of space, because eventually all of the gas molecules would collide with and repulse one another until all of their eventual trajectories shot them off into space with nothing to pull them back towards the Earth. So hopefully this is now clear. Flat earthers need to drop the vacuum next to the atmosphere argument. Number 4, Earth spin creating 1,000-mile-per-hour winds. I'm sure many of you have seen this on many flat earth channels. They claim that the spin of the Earth would cause 1,000-mile-per-hour winds at the equator, moving in an east to west direction, dramatically affecting everything from airplanes to hot air balloons to launched projectiles and everything else you can imagine. And obviously winds of that magnitude would flatten everything on the surface of the Earth, making life on Earth impossible, creating mega tsunamis, etc., etc. Now, I'm not going to say that this claim is 100% incorrect. You would get a steady east to west wind due to Earth spin, but it wouldn't be 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. I cover this in my Flat Earth Proof 128, so go check that out for the full derivation of how I arrive at the result that I show here. Basically, you would have two motions contributing to atmospheric drag. There is the spin of the Earth, and then you have the rotation of the Earth around the Earth-Moon barycenter. Both of those are moving in the same direction, so you can add them together, creating a total atmospheric wind moving east to west at 50 miles altitude of 13.5 miles per hour. And you might say, but it seems like it should be much more than that, because the surface velocity of the Earth at the equator is supposedly 1,000 miles an hour, and the surface velocity of the Earth at the equator due to the Earth-Moon barycenter motion is an additional 66 miles per hour. So I can understand why people would expect very high winds as a result. But you have to remember, compared to the 4,000-mile radius of the ball Earth, the 80-mile thick atmosphere is paper thin. And so even though gas molecules contain very little friction, allowing each layer of molecules to slide past the previous layer almost uninhibited, including the bottom layer of air molecules across the ground, there is not much distance differential between the distance that the bottom air molecules near the ground have to travel around the equator versus the distance the air molecules at 50 miles altitude have to travel around the equator. And so it's due to the fact that the distance between those two circles of travel for air molecules at those two elevations are almost the same, that the resulting backwards slippage of each molecular layer of the atmosphere is barely any at all. So as you can see here, it's only a 313-mile difference between those two elevations, divided by 24 hours, gives you a 13-mile-an-hour wind. And you would do the same exercise for the two circles of the Earth-Moon barycenter rotation at those two elevations to get the extra 0.5 miles per hour. But again, if you want to see the full derivation, go to my Flat Earth Proof 128. Now, this does not get globe defenders off the hook, though, because a lot of globe propagandists try to claim that there would be no wind at all produced by the spin of the Earth, because friction would basically keep all of the molecules locked in step with the rotation. And that is also incorrect. Number 5, gravity not needed, just density and buoyancy. So I'm sure you've heard a lot of flat earth channels make the statement that we don't need gravity. And furthermore, we don't need any downward pulling force at all. That everything is sorted out with just density and buoyancy. Let's examine this critically. Here we have a density tower. You can see that when you add all these different materials to this cylinder, Their densities determine at what layer each material sits in this column. Now imagine you took this density tower and placed it in an environment with absolutely zero forces acting upon it. A complete void with no gravity or any force pulling or pushing upon any of this material. What do you think is going to happen? Well, I'll tell you what would happen. All of these different materials will be floating around in blobs being held together by molecular bonds in random directions in 3D space. If two or more materials were to touch each other, their differing densities would just cause them to slide around each other or bounce off one another depending on what the materials are. And that's it. So that proves you need more than just density and buoyancy. It is only when you apply a directional force to all of these materials that they form a density tower like this. Thus, in order to have a realm like the Earth, arranged in the way that it is, there must be a downward pulling force. Now, what that force is another question altogether. I think the best theory on what that force is that the Flat Earth community has right now is the incoherent electrostatic acceleration force that, although very weak, is enough to set the downward direction. And then density and buoyancy handles the rest. Number 6, you don't feel any of the many motions of the Earth. Here's a post from Physics Stack Exchange. Although humans have sensitive rotation detectors in our inner ears, the reason we can't detect the Earth's rotation with them is that it is too slow for those detectors to sense. They work well when your head is rotating at an angular velocity on the order of 1 revolution per second, but at a 1 revolution per minute, they produce no signal. And because Earth's rotation is 1 revolution per 24 hours, they definitely won't produce a signal. So that's why we don't feel the angular rotation of the Earth. But what about acceleration and deceleration? As you know, if you've watched all of my flat Earth proofs, the Earth is undergoing, supposedly, many accelerations and decelerations all the time due to its many motions and its interactions with all of the bodies in the solar system, and even a couple more from sources outside the solar system. Hopefully everyone realizes that you wouldn't feel constant speed, and I feel like everyone understands that, but we do feel acceleration and deceleration. Well, let's take a look. I found what I think is a sufficient answer from this individual in a physics discussion. Here they say, 2 things, we only feel contact forces, and the changes in Earth's acceleration during its orbit are extremely small. We do not feel gravity, as it is a non-contact force. We feel the ground pushing back up on us when on Earth's surface, or the air pushing back up on us as we fall. The elliptical orbit of the Earth around the Sun does cause changes in the acceleration we experience. However, these variations are too small for us to perceive. The acceleration due to the Sun's gravity varies by about 0.0002 meters per second squared over the year. For comparison, the acceleration on us due to Earth's gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared, which is about 50,000 times greater. So there you have it. That's why our senses would not pick up any of the motions of the Earth. So flat earthers need to drop not feeling the Earth move as one of their proofs. However, I want to finish this out with a disclaimer for all of the globers out there. Just because a human being would not physically feel these motions does not mean that instruments would not be able to detect them. It also does not mean that there wouldn't be major tectonic implications, atmospheric implications, oceanic implications, issues with the core, issues with the orbits of planets and moons in the solar system, and many other issues that you can find in many of my proofs. Number 7, Olber's paradox. The night sky should be solid white. This is a proof that I haven't seen too often, but I have seen it. And the argument is that there are so many stars out there, and the universe is so vast, supposedly, that no matter what vector direction you look in the universe, eventually that line of sight should hit a star at some distance, and thus the night sky should appear white. Here's why that is wrong from the vantage point of their universe model. Number 1, the universe is not infinite and the light from the furthest stars has not reached us yet. Number 2, Doppler effect of stars moving away from us shifts the visible light into invisible microwave background radiation. And number 3, there's not enough dust to scatter the light like you have in Earth's atmosphere. And of course, we have reason number 4, which is the inverse square law of light, where if you double the distance, you only have a quarter of the light intensity. If you triple the distance, you have 1/9 of the light intensity, and so on. And this means that at a certain distance, the light emitted from a particular distant star in space will be too weak to be detected by the human eye. And thus, according to your eyes, that point in the sky would look black. But, Globers, don't get too excited on me now, because this simple law, the inverse square law of light, invalidates the entire globe Earth universe. So go check out my Flat Earth proof number 82, where I demonstrate that due to this law, none of the stars in space will be visible on Earth with the naked eye, other than the sun. Number 8, canals, railroads, and long bridges do not account for curvature. I know everyone has seen these proofs a million times, where someone says the people who constructed this railway didn't account for curvature, or this 24-mile-long bridge, or a 100-mile-long canal, or an 8-mile-long tunnel, or a 300-mile-long oil pipeline. And while this is true, it is irrelevant and not useful as a flat Earth proof, because whether or not the Earth is curved or not would have no bearing or effect on any of these projects. It won't affect any of the engineering specs, it won't affect any of the design specs, and it won't affect any of the material quantities. There is only one participating party in any of these projects that would deal with supposed Earth curvature, and that would be your surveyors. But again, as I said in one of my previous flat Earth proofs, this is how surveyors are tricked into thinking there is Earth curvature when there's really not. This post is from a professional surveyor, and here they say, things like pipelines and tunnels are surveyed off datum elevations. A vertical datum is a surface of zero elevation to which heights of various other points are referenced. Vertical datums already fit the surface curvature of the Earth. In the USA, the current vertical datum for the contiguous United States and Alaska is the North American vertical datum of 1988. Then they give an example. Imagine a pipeline needs to be built 6 feet below the ground. It needs to run level. All the ground it crosses is level and at elevation 4,236 above sea level. Benchmark points will be set every few hundred feet or 1,000 feet at elevation 4,236. The pipeline builders will build 6 feet below those benchmarks. Since the benchmarks are based on the North American vertical datum, they already follow the curvature of the Earth. The surveyors for the construction company don't have to worry about it. And that's where the trick comes into play. You are not going to have a surveyor out there trying to scope in an elevation a mile away to see if it's dropped 8 inches due to Earth curvature. They just assume the curvature is there because their field equipment and the software back in their home office computers are telling them it's there, so they don't question it. So just like in this example here for the pipeline, the surveyors will walk the line, and then every few hundred feet, they'll put a benchmark at that 4,236 foot elevation point. And the only way that they will know that that point is at that elevation is that their GPS-based equipment is telling them that it is. And so they'll assume, without even thinking about it, that their equipment is automatically following the North American vertical datum of 1988 based on their GPS location. But of course, little do these surveyors know that they are mapping elevation points on a flat Earth geometry and not a ball Earth geometry. So again, flat earthers need to stop using the construction of these large projects as proof of a lack of curvature. Number 9, objects in the sky rise and set due to perspective. I saved the best one for last because this is without a doubt one of the most irritating proofs I have ever seen from the flat earth community, and far too many flat earthers buy into it. What you are looking at here in this graphic is what they like to call an azimuthal grid of vision. which is represented by the smaller dome within the bigger domed Earth here. They try to claim that we have curved visual space and that the limit of that visual space creates a personal dome of visibility, like your own personal planetarium, where objects beyond the boundary of this dome are projected onto it. And if you think that's crazy, just wait, it gets worse. Now, I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to explain this phenomena that we see with the movement of things in the sky, including star trails, where you have a rotation in the north, a rotation in the south, and basically a vertical up and down, rising and setting to the east and west. So they add an additional tweak to this personal dome of vision by applying the perspective grid that you see there on the left, where there is a perspective convergence along only the north and the south, because they are trying to mimic the star trail pattern I just showed you. But of course, this is not how perspective works. And the vanishing point wouldn't only be just in the north and the south. If you look at the perspective grid to the right, that is what you would have if you had a vanishing point in the north, the south, and the east and the west, which is more realistic, but it's still not 100% realistic as to what would actually happen. And of course, the perspective grid on the right would completely mess up the effect that they are trying to achieve, which is why they use the one on the left with only 2 vanishing points. In reality, though, this is what you would get. Not only would you get a vanishing point to the north, the south, the east, and the west, but the entire circular horizon would become one continuous 360-degree vanishing point, as you see here depicted by this graphic. And there is a term for this type of visual space, and it's called parabolic geometry. The problem with this is that under parabolic geometry or parabolic perspective, you get some weird effects. For one, the ground curves away from you like you're standing on a small globe. And the other weird effect is that things in the sky move in a strange pattern, with things arcing towards you and then away from you along all directions that you look in 360 degrees. For one, this is not going to reproduce the movements of things in the sky that we see. Number 2, we know that the ground doesn't curve away from us downward like this in all directions. And number 3, if that's what our vision was doing on the macro scale, then we would notice it on the micro scale too. Even just looking around your room, you would begin to notice a non-Euclidean aspect to your perspective. So not only does this not reproduce what they are looking for, but it's also clearly not how our perspective works. We view the world in normal Euclidean perspective. So flat earthers need to drop this azimuthal grid of vision nonsense or curved visual space nonsense. Now let's take a step back to the drawing board and rethink this whole thing. This is the current problem that the flat earth model has. The left squares of this image show what a rotating field of celestial objects over a flat earth would look like, with normal Euclidean perspective factored in. The squares on the right show what actual observations of star trails do in the sky. Now, a moment ago, I said the current problem that the flat earth model has. But in actuality, this problem of the movement of celestial objects in the sky over a flat earth was solved. And you can find the solution on the YouTube channel Steve, where they present a computer model using Cinema 4D to simulate a flat earth with a level atmos plane over top of it. And it demonstrates how the optical refraction reproduces exactly what we see in the sky, including the rising and setting sun and moon, and all of the star trails, including the north and south rotation. There is a link in the description box to their channel and this particular video where they demonstrate this. They begin by showing you the fact that if we had an atmos plane over a flat earth, with the thick part of it being about 5 miles in elevation, that would cause us to see only apparent positions of all the objects in the sky, and in addition would make them sink into the horizon, appearing to rise or set. So they build the computer model, they put in all the atmospheric data, and then they place the sun inside. They then turn the atmos plane on and off in order to observe how it changes the apparent position of the sun in the sky as it approaches you on the flat earth. And so as you can see, with the Atmos plane turned on, it makes the sun rise in the sky as it approaches, just as we observe in reality. Then they added in the star trails, and this is what they look like with the Atmos plane turned off, with just normal Euclidean perspective. And this, of course, is what all the globies tell us that we should be seeing if we were on a flat Earth. Because for some reason, they think the flat Earth would be in a perfect vacuum. And then they turn the Atmos plane on, and look what we get. There's your star trail rotation. And this is what you see looking east or west. And that's pretty darn close. They use sort of your typical flat Earth consensus as to the distances or elevations to the sun and moon, using 4,150 miles elevation for the sun and roughly 4,000 miles elevation for the moon. They place the planets at varying altitudes. Again, I highly recommend you go and watch their video on this. And of course, it's not exactly perfect. As you see here, you get a little distortion as you get close to the horizon. But it's very close, and you could probably get it even closer with some additional tweaking. Here they show the top frame with the Atmos plane turned on, and the bottom one with it turned off. And you can see the difference, where the Atmos plane is what is making the sunset. And so all of that confirms what I already knew from the get-go when I first learned about the flat Earth, and that is that there is a lensing effect happening in the sky, just as you see here with the light in the glass dome. And if this is really the accurate model of the Earth found in the Book of Enoch, where you have multiple firmaments creating multiple compound lensing effects, then really the possibilities are endless as to what effect this all has on objects in the sky based on the size, the shape, and the properties of each one of these firmaments. I believe this is the key, and my hope is that one day, one of us will model this, and we will finally be able to show the world that not only do we have a working flat Earth model, but that it is actually more precise than the globe model in predicting the positions of the celestial objects, and does not have the thousands of associated problems that the globe Earth model and universe contain. So this is what we all need to be working on next, and I can definitely say this is going to be a huge undertaking and will require an enormously powerful computer and 3D modeling software package, maybe even something on the order of a special effects studio, such as a company like Pixar or Industrial Light and Magic. But of course the cost of that would be astronomical. I have tried to model some of this myself in Blender 3D, to no avail. If there are any Blender 3D experts out there that know of any modifications or add-ons that give you the capability to model complex atmospherics and optics, definitely let me know. Like, share, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.